Hey everyone and welcome to the Retro Channel, and today another Commodore 64 repair. This one, however, may be a bit of a challenge. Apparently it was originally full of rust and it's actually spent some time in a bath of deoxit in order to try and remove some of it. And the owner of this machine did try and get it running, but eventually they hit a wall, so they've sent it over to me to take a look. And it's a Commodore 64, so how can I refuse? So I am quite curious to see what we have on the inside, but let's first take a look at the outside, and obviously it's missing the badge, but the case seems to be in one piece. We don't have anything where the RF modulator would be, which is interesting. The underside of the case looks like the underside of a case, so it's not too bad. It looks to be mostly intact. I guess we'll open this up first just to see what sort of carnage is on the inside before we go trying to apply power to this thing. Alrighty. It does have the screws in it, and yeah, they've definitely seen better days, but they're in one piece, so they're good enough. Okay. Alright, well, at first glance it doesn't look too bad. Let's get this out of the way. Ooh. The keyboard doesn't look too good. That's a lot darker shade of brown than I'm used to seeing. That's going to require some TLC, no doubt. Alright, on the inside we have an RF modulator replacement. I've actually tested this one out before and yeah, it's decent. Obviously not as good as mine, but then again I may be biased in that. This does, however, remind me that I need to order some more of mine for the Tindy store, so let's head over to our channel sponsor, PCBWay. Yes, PCBWay can handle all your PCB prototyping needs. They also offer assembly services, CNC machining, 3D printing, and a whole lot more. They also have a fantastic shared projects section where you can find various designs from different creators, including my RF replacement. So I may as well order some of these right now. Might even grab a few different colors this time. Anyway, let's head back to that Commodore 64, and we thank PCBWay for sponsoring this video. What this does have going for it though is it is compatible with both the long board and the short board just by moving these jumpers. Unfortunately, it doesn't offer any outputs directly off this board, so you end up with holes at the back of the machine. But we'll worry about that thing later. Let's just have a look over the actual board, and well, yeah, there are signs of rust, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. All the screws are rusty, as is the cartridge shield, but overall it's not terrible. I was actually expecting a lot worse, but then again, it has been in a bath of deoxit, so maybe that's helped out quite a bit. Some of the major ICs are in sockets, and ooh, what is going on with that? So the 8701 looks to have sustained some damage, and there's actually a leg soldered onto it, which looks to be from a single or dual wipe socket. So I don't know if that's actually come out of this particular socket or if that's a bodge to repair that leg. We'll have a look on the underside in a second. There's also a couple of the logic ICs and a couple of the RAM ICs in sockets as well. Apart from that, there's no glaring issues, so let's take a look at the underside, see what's going on there. And there's a screw missing right there. Alrighty. Yeah, a little bit of rust residue, but not too shabby. That standoff is broken, that's why there's no screw there. And on the underside, obviously there's been some rework here because that's the RF modulator. And apart from that, CPU looks to have been replaced. It looks a little bit different from the other solder joints. Possibly the PLA as well. And yeah, definitely these logic and RAM ICs. But the soldering looks fine. There's a bit of flux residue, but nothing to write home about. I don't see any broken traces or bridged connections, so no worries there for now. So, what is going on with this 8701? In fact, oh yeah, there is a pin sticking through the other side, so that pin has not just come out of that socket. Let's just check it for continuity. Let's just try from there to there. Okay, we're getting continuity, so it's at least intact. So whatever's going on there appears to be working, so let's just leave that alone for now. And doesn't look like there's any shorts to ground or a short across the AC side, so I think we're safe to at least plug this into power. So I'm going to use my metal brick. These were released only in Australia, I believe, and they only came out with very early Commodore 64s. We later moved on to the plastic bricks. But this one does have one of BWAC's C64 savers inside, so hopefully that provides a little bit of protection just in case. So let's just power this thing on, see what voltages we get. Oh, I think it was already powered on. Well, hopefully our voltages are good. 11.91 on the 12 volts, 5 volts there, that's good. And over here we should see 5 volts, which is coming directly from the power supply. And finally we can look at the AC side, but given that our voltage regulators were outputting the right voltages, yeah, 9.5 volts there AC, all good. Let's hook up a display and see if we get any video output from it. Okay, well, we get something. We get a black screen, but that's still something. It's at least showing some signs of life. Let's throw in the dead test and see what that gives us. Oh, we get one flash. Let's just power cycle that. Yep, one flash. Well, at least that's consistent. So according to the flash code chart, one flash refers to U12 on this style board and data bit 7. U12 is this one here, which is in a socket. So it could well be that that RAM chip has an issue, but let's just pretend that it's not in a socket and we don't particularly want to remove it from the board just yet. So an easy way to look for obvious faults is just to feel all these ICs once the machine's been powered on for a couple of minutes. And it's currently running at the moment, so I'm just feeling over these ICs, trying to find something that's getting extremely hot. And none of the smaller stuff is getting warm, especially not the suspect RAM. The major ICs, some of these will get a little bit warm, especially the CPU, the SID and the PLA. And the VIC-2 usually gets the hottest, but once again, nothing is burning hot, so no luck there. The other thing we can do without removing this RAM IC is just to piggyback a known good RAM IC over the top of it. Sometimes you'll get lucky with this, and the good RAM IC can actually take over from the bad one. We don't really have anything to lose, so let's give that a shot. So I've got a known good Texas Instruments RAM IC. Let's just stick this one over the top and make sure all the legs are touching the RAM underneath. Let's see what that brings us. And we still have one flash. Just move that around a little bit, just to make sure it was getting good contact. Oh, still one flash. Well, that didn't work, but like I said, it's a simple test and you've got nothing to lose. So let's keep pretending that these are actually soldered into the board and it's going to take a bit of work to remove them. So we've pretty much got two options here. You can either just desolder that IC and hope that that was the issue, or we can take a look with the scope and try and narrow down the exact fault, because the dead test isn't always 100% accurate, and sometimes it'll point towards a particular RAM IC and it could be something like PLA or some logic that's causing the issue, even some of the ROM chips. Pretty much whatever's connected to data bit 7 could be suspect, and that's basically everything. Alright, let's start by taking a look at that RAM IC. So we'll look at the data output, which is pin 14. So let's just do a power cycle on that. Yeah, okay. So actual activity on that pin is few and far between. It starts off fairly active, but then that time it didn't. So we can see on some of the other data lines that we get a flurry of activity when it's first powered on, and then it sort of spreads out a little bit. But if we compare that to this IC, there is very little activity going on there in comparison. Although when we first power it on, we get that huge amount and then it sort of drops to that. So I have to wonder if something is holding it high during that middle period. Tracking that down may be a challenge though. So let's have a look at where else data bit 7 goes, which is pretty much everywhere, but an easy place is probably one of these ROMs. So pin 17 on these ROMs is data bit 7. So that's 13, 14, 15. What's going on there? Dodgy connection again. 16, 17. And you can definitely see 17 doesn't look right. In fact, it looks like something is trying to bring it down. So yeah, it looks like something's trying to bring it down, but that may not be enough to trigger a low level for TTL logic. So normally to trigger a low level, you need below 0.8 volts. So we can see this bottom line down here, according to the cursors, does extend down to around 608 millivolts. So that is enough to trigger a low. But these other pulses, yeah, they only get down to around 1.3, 1.4 volts, which isn't enough. And if we look at the pin next to it, which is one of the other data bits, you can see there's plenty of extension down to the bottom of the screen. Again, that might just be poor contact. If I move the probe around, they actually look okay. But there's still sort of a lack of activity, and I don't know if that's normal or not. I think what I need to do is give this board a good scrub with some IPA, especially around the legs of some of these chips. See if that makes any difference. It probably won't, but at least we should get better contact when we're trying to probe these things. I think this is just in like a socket. Yes, it is. Cool. So I might actually pull these out of their sockets, but I'm just going to mark, let's mark U12 with a dot, just so we know where that came from. Yeah, that's just a replacement leg. Right, let me go give this board a scrub with some IPA. It does look like there's some deoxit left in these sockets, which is perfectly fine, but yeah, it doesn't help that some of these pins are fairly crusty. I'm guessing they originally had a bunch of surface rust on them. So the board got a quick douse in IPA and a little bit of a scrub with a nylon brush. And well, you can still see where some of that deoxit was. It definitely leaves a film on everything. I also went over these socketed chips with the fiberglass pen just to make sure the legs are nice and clean. And while they don't look it, I'm pretty sure they're going to make decent contact. So let's just throw these back in and see if it made any difference. I really doubt anything's going to change, but let's just find out. Nope, we still get one flash, so at least it didn't make it worse. Right, well, the oscilloscope isn't leading us to a smoking gun, so let's pull out this RAM IC. I just want to see what that data line looks like without it. Does the same thing. So I think that particular RAM IC is okay. In fact, let's just swap these two around, see if that makes any difference, but I really do doubt it. Yep, same sort of behavior, and now our suspect RAM, yeah, looks normal in the other socket. So it certainly seems like databit 7 has an issue, but unfortunately it's connected to just about everything on the board, so there's no real easy way to track this down without just removing chips. So I'm just going to pull all the socketed chips, test them in another machine, although I think they're all going to turn out to be working, and then we'll continue on from there. Alright, trusty old Ziff machine, just make sure it's still working. Otherwise it wouldn't be trusty. That is good. Let's just start throwing in these chips. VIC2 is good. The 8701 is good. PLA is good. The SID, although we're not going to be able to hear anything, but we can at least make sure it doesn't stop the machine from booting. Ooh. Oh, that was weird. Okay, might have just been bad contact there. Okay. Could still be bad, but at least it doesn't halt the machine. Well, at least I don't think it does. CPU is good. The 74 LS257 seems happy. The 74 LS139 is one of the only chips that I don't have in a socket. That's right, we'll use the Mini Pro to test that. Now, two RAM ICs. The suspect one, I'm sure it's going to be good. Seems fine. And the other one also seems fine. No real surprises there. And a quick check of the 74 139. Yeah, it tests fine. I'll believe that. So we're no closer to knowing what's wrong with this machine, but at least we know it's not these chips. So my gut feeling is it's going to be one of these ROMs. I'm going to plug this back in. This time I'm going to break out the thermal cam just to see if there's some slight variation here that I couldn't pick up just by touching the chips. So our CIAs over here look to be completely cold. In fact, you can see where I've touched them. The ROMs, it looks like the basic ROM is the warmest out of the three, so let's start with that. So rather than firing up the desoldering gun, I've just removed the solder around that single pin just with the solder sucker, just to isolate it from the rest of the board. And I think they've just been able to do that. So let's just see if that made any difference. We get a single flash. Let's try the others. Alright, I think I've managed to remove the connection from these three ROM ICs to the board underneath. So let's see if that does anything. Oh, still one flash. Well, there's still the CIAs, I guess. Right, so I think I've now isolated both CIAs and all three ROMs from the main board on data bit 7. Let's see. Oh, dead test is starting. So this is the Kinsey dead test, who's a member on Forum 64 DE, and there it is. So it does appear that one of the CIAs is corrupting data bit 7. Our timers are all screwed up, but that might just be because we disconnected one of the data bits to them. And it gives us color ran bad, and we get a panic screen. Panic at the disco. Don't know whether to believe that just yet. Let's reconnect one of these CIAs. In fact, before we do that, let's just try it again, make sure it wasn't some kind of fluke. No, dead test is coming up. Yep. Okay, let's, reconnect one of these, see if our problem comes back. Let's go with U1. So if I had just started removing these chips, I would have removed all the ROMs by now, plus possibly one or both of the CIAs. It would seem like number 2. Let's just try and reconnect it, just temporarily. And we get our single flash. So CIA2 is definitely the cause of this problem. Let's get that out and then see what else we have to deal with. Should do it. Ta-da! Ew. Look at that. Nasty. Just quickly go over these with a bit of braid just to sort of clean them up a little bit. Cool. Let's get a socket in. Right, our socket is in. Let's give this another try. In fact, we'll leave the CIA out because we don't actually need that to run the dead test. Let's see what it does. You're joking. We're back to one flash. I'm sure... Did I pull out the wrong CIA? Sure it was. Oh no. So I reconnected everything else. Let me just disconnect the first CIA again. All right, I think I've isolated that pin. Yep. Let's try that. One flash. It's possible that one of the ROMs also has a fault. Right, let's isolate those again. Do it one by one. Right, I think that's the kernel isolated. So we'll get one flash. That should be character ROM out of the equation. One flash. Right, I think that's all 3 ROMs and the remaining CIA off data bit 7. And now it's starting. Let's put this CIA in. I get the feeling that the last one I disconnected, which was the basic ROM, also causes the same problem. So yeah, CIA gives us one flash. Without the CIA, it's booting up. And if we reconnect the basic ROM, one flash. Right, we'll take the basic ROM out. Ta-da! Alright, new socket is in. I'm not going to get cocky this time and reconnect everything else. Let's just try this again. Okay, dead test is starting. Put basic ROM in. One flash. CIA. One flash. So far that's 2 chips causing the same single flash code and 100% not related to the RAM. Okay, I'm going to reconnect the other chips. Right, it was only those 2. Thank God for that. Before we let the dead test run through, let's just put in a working CIA and a working basic ROM. Let's see how this goes. So the timer on CIA 1 is still messed up. We can see 7F, That should say 0000011 AM, like the other timer, except, well, AM. And yeah, we're still getting caloram bad. And also down the bottom it says data bit 0 is bad. Which one am I supposed to be concerned with? And yeah, the Kinsey dead test, if it encounters an error, it goes into like the kernel panic state, so you get the crazy flashing border. Well, we can be pretty certain that the other CIA is also bad, so let's just start by pulling that out. It's going to have to come out anyway, and we'll continue from there. All right, another socket's in. Borrow the other CIA. Here we go again. No way. No way. What the fuck? We're back to one flash. I'm sure that these things from the ZIF board work, so let's stick all these suspects in the ZIF board, see what we get. Let's just throw in basic ROM to start with. Alright, it doesn't boot, which is actually what I wanted to see, because if it did, I think I'd lose my mind. We get one flash. Good. That is definitely bad. We don't need a basic ROM for the dead test, so I'll leave that out. Let's throw in one of the CIAs. System is booting. Both timers are messed up, so I'm pretty satisfied that that has an issue. Let's do the other one. Again, we're booting, which is weird. Oh, and we booted to garbage. Either way, I'm satisfied that both of these, well, all three of these chips are bad. And yes, certainly both the CIAs that were originally in the ZIF board appear to be working, which they should be. So what's going on? Why don't they work when we stick them in the other board? So this is the CIA that took us back to one flash when we put it in. So let's stick just that in. We get one flash, but it works in the ZIF board. Let's put it in the other socket. It's booting. So did I screw something up on that socket? It certainly didn't bridge anything. So could it be that something talks to the CIA at U1, which doesn't happen at U2, and having the original bad CIA in there allowed the machine to boot because that CIA obviously isn't working, and now that we put a good one in there, it also refuses to boot because whatever's trying to talk to it has an issue. We still get one flash with this CIA, but I get the feeling that was originally the one at U2. And now it's booting with the CIA that was originally in there, which obviously has a fault. So it just so happens that because that CIA has a fault, it'll actually allow the machine to boot. That's so crazy. Like, this whole machine so far has been a bit crazy. Let's check them out on the scope. So yeah, pin 1 looks a little bit odd. It looks like it's not reaching a low logic level. What does it look like on the other CIA? On the other CIA, it is just always low. Ooh, and pin 21 doesn't look right either. It looks a lot like pin 1. And on the second CIA, yeah, both those signals are just high. Well, no, one of them's high, one of them's low. So 1 and 21 don't look right. And everything else looks fairly normal. Maybe 40 looks a bit odd, but I don't know. Pin 1, pin 21, and pin 40. Let's see what they're related to. Oh. 1 is ground? What? Pin 1. That is definitely not ground. That's ground. That's ground. That's not ground. Just to make sure I'm not going crazy. That's ground. That's ground. Oh. Yeah, it would help if I actually soldered the ground pin. Maybe that's what happens with the CA when the pin 1 is not grounded. It just has random signals floating around on it. Maybe they're just really low impedance, or are they high impedance? Low impedance. I don't know. Yeah, so there's definitely no signal on there when there's no CA in there, so I guess it's just getting through that ground pin somehow. Ah dear, happens to the best of us. Okay, CA socket now has ground. Let's try this again. In fact, yes. While we've still got the scope on the screen, let's just see what happens. Yeah, okay. It definitely looks to be grounded now. What are we going to get? Aha. We don't have any more single flashes. I can't tell you how happy I am not to see that again. And it looks like we have proper timers. I bet you it'll still fail on the color RAM check though. Yes, it does. So, color RAM bad, data bit 0 bad. So here's our color RAM, and it does indeed have a connection to data bit 0 coming off pin 14. That goes up to U16, which is a 4066, and to the VIC2 on pin 38. Let's have a look at that. So let's just see what happens. So the dead test will be starting up right now. All looks pretty normal, so far so good. It's a bit different, but okay. Oh, and everything just changed. I reckon we're at the part of the dead test where it's testing the RAM. Yes, we are. So yeah, it definitely changes when it goes to do that part of the test. So we can see on the 4066 that pin 12 controls this switch here, and that'll connect or disconnect pin 11 to pin 10. Let's have a look at those three. So I've set up the scope to look at all three signals. So what we can see is the blue line, that's basically our switch turning on and off, and that's connecting the purple line and the yellow line together. So whenever that goes high, purple and yellow are connected together. So I took a little break from this board just to have a bit of a think and hope that the answer came to me, and that didn't really happen. I did spend some time off camera just poking at some of these logic gates, specifically the 74LS139 and the 4066 and also the 74LS373. According to the schematics, the chip select is connected to AEC and color signal, which is active low. That connects to the 74LS139, and I checked all the logic there, everything looks right. And that comes from A10 and A11, and also one of the pins from the PLA. There is also the GRW pin from the PLA goes to write enable on the color RAM, and there's a 74LS08. All of these gates checked out just fine. I also had a look at this 74LS373, and that also looks fine. So I can't find any obvious issue with these logic ICs. I also went ahead and just swapped out all the chips, putting the VIC2 back in the ZIF board, basically swapping all of these socketed chips over between boards, and the fault stayed with this board. Now, one thing I did notice is that running the dead test a few times, sometimes it'll report color RAM and D1 bad, sometimes it's color RAM and D0. And looking back at the schematics again, I thought that D1 and D0 were referring to the data lines on the color RAM, given that it's running the color RAM test and that's when we get bad on those signals. But I think it's actually referring to the main data lines, which are D1 and D0, which are not the same data lines on the color RAM. So I think the dead test reports bad on color RAM because it's currently running the color RAM test, but it's actually failing on data bit 0 or data bit 1. So let's take a look at those signals, see how they look. So we'll use the basic ROM socket as it's easily accessible, and apparently data bit 0 is on pin 9. So that's data bit 0. It looks okay, doesn't look great. There's data bit 1, which looks sort of the same, and pin 11 should be data bit 2. And yeah, there is a little bit of a difference. Let me just get a single shot. Look at those slopes on the left-hand side. Yeah, there are some odd pulses in there. That's on data bit 1. If we look at data bit 2, you can see there's a couple of little spikes in there, but we definitely don't have those rounded pulses like we do on 0 and 1. And similar to what we had with data bit 7, data bit 0 and 1 are going all over this board. So could be a RAM issue, could be these ROMs. Don't think it's going to be any of this logic, and I'm almost certain it's not any of these socketed chips. So I think I might start with the ROMs, and specifically the kernel ROM. The machine still won't boot if we take out the dead test, we just get a black screen, but it can, however, run Ultimax games. So if I swap this over, it's So I've got Avenger here, which is an Ultimax game, and it seems to run that without issues. So in Ultimax mode, like the dead test, it's not using any of the ROMs because it's running in Ultimax mode, which is based on the Commodore Max machine, which didn't have any internal ROMs. So my feeling is it's going to be a bad kernel ROM, and I'm perfectly happy to take that out because having the kernel ROM in a socket also allows you to swap out to, different kernel ROMs, Jiffy DOS and such. So let's pop out the kernel ROM, put a socket in, see what happens. Alrighty, another socket in. We'll leave the kernel ROM out for now. Let's give this a test. Alright, still boots. That's always good. I mean, it should. Here we go, moment of truth. It's going. Go, you good thing. Aha, sweet. Obviously, no sound test because there's no SID, and the timer's messed up because no CIAs, but this is progress. And it's starting again. All right. Now, we're not completely out of the woods yet, but at least we know bad kernel, and we can add that to the other bad chips. So we'll set all these aside. There could still be other faulty ICs in here, but there's not much left. So fingers crossed that was the last one. Let's throw some ROMs in and some working CIAs. We'll even throw the SID in while we're at it. Let's see if we can get into BASIC. All right, board is fully populated. Let's see what happens. Ha-ha! That's the screen we want to see. Well, I probably should hook up the audio and also the diagnostic harness, and we'll see if this thing passes. All right, are we going to have any more problems? The box at the bottom looks a bit weird. What's going on there? Well, the harness is connected. I'm not hearing any sound either. Well, that's not very encouraging. I also noticed that the checksum for the character ROM looks to be wrong. Yeah, I'm sure that character ROM checksum should be something other than F0 F80D. I think it's similar to that, but not quite that. And that might explain the oddity with the box at the bottom. Maybe there's just something in the character ROM that ain't quite right. I've just swapped back to the ZIF board. I've left these other ICs in this board for now. I just want to make sure my setup is working properly first. And I might swap over to the no RAM check diagnostic, so we're not sitting through waiting for those RAM tests to complete. Still getting a bunch of errors on the ports. But we can see the character ROM says F3, F7, F8. That is definitely the correct checksum for the regular character ROM. Do I have sound? Am I going to get sound? No, we're stuck on the interrupt test. Just going to swap these CIAs around because I think this other one has longer legs, which should fit a little bit better in the ZIF socket. Yeah, it does. Let's put that in there and that in the other socket. That should work. Control port bad. Screw you. Okay, at least my sound setup is working. That's the main thing I wanted to know. Don't know why I'm getting control port bad. Might be just bad connection. Why am I getting control port bad? Don't be like that. Don't give me that. Don't even give me that. Oof, now I'm going to user port bad as well. Right, for some reason it keeps giving me control port bad. This should be working, it could just be my harness, but the ARM SID definitely supports all the controller port functions, the POT X and Y inputs. So we'll ignore that for now. Let's throw in the SID from the other board, see if we get sound out of it. So it'll probably also give us control port bad. Yeah, I think it's my harness. Yeah, SID seems to be working, so no problems there. I reckon the rest of the port issues are just down to these bad contacts, but we also have a fault with this character ROM, so this one's coming out too. Sweet. While I've still got this all hooked up, let's just throw the suspect character ROM in here. We should get the same issue. Yeah, the box at the bottom is turned all weird and we get the wrong checksum. That's a bad character ROM. So, add the character ROM to the tally, we're up to 5. May as well just throw in some of my ROM replacements. So there's a new kernel ROM, there's a new character ROM. Won't go for the dual character ROM this time, we'll just go the regular character ROM. Unfortunately, I'm out of stock of the basic ROM, so I'm still going to have to steal that from here. The SID chip sounds like it's working, so no worries there. And we'll throw the CIAs back in, and then we'll run the diagnostic again, see if it passes. Okay, will this be it? Character ROM looks good. User port and control port bad. I reckon that's just still bad connection. Oh. Well, at least our SID now appears to be working. Is it my harness? Is it that edge connector? I really don't think it's the CIAs. Ooh. Or is it all these nasty looking traces over here? Some of those don't look too healthy, and guess where they go? So I've double checked continuity at the ports, and most of the signals made it over to the first CIA. A couple of them go to this 4066, and one of them, being the light pen input, goes to the VIC-2. So all the signals were there, but the pins on the joystick ports were pretty crusty. So I went over them with a brass bristle pen, and now we get this. And that is the sweet smell of success. So I think the board is now good to go. The keyboard, on the other hand, I'm not so sure about, but we're about to find out. Okay, with any luck, should be able to use the easy flash. Nice. Let's do the old keyboard test. Well, at least it's partially working. Well, that's a surprise, and also quite the relief, because I don't really like fixing keyboards. Much rather do the other stuff. Let's do a proper test of that SID. Well, I'm happy to report the SID sounds okay. The bandpass filter sounds a little bit low, but there's variations in SID, so I'm happy to call this one good. So now that the system works, I am curious to see what happens when we throw in this one, which just had the wrong timers on it. I wonder if it partially works though. Yeah, and with the diagnostic harness hooked up, it fails almost all the tests. It also says C65 diagnostic provision. Oh. Wow, okay, it also seems to screw with the SID. Let's get that out of there. What the fuck? Oh. Hang on. Hang on. Hang on. Okay. I think it's just a bad connection on the SID socket because it now sounds normal again. Okay. It's back to normal. Just a bad connection on that SID socket. And of course, the SID is one of the originals from this machine, I guess, because it is in very rough shape and it is only a single wipe socket. I think while we're here, we should at least replace that socket because that certainly isn't helping. Right, junky socket is out, put a new one in. SID goes back in, do a quick sound test just in case. Okay, we know it sounds good. I think that is really it for this one. I might throw in one of my basic ROMs. Depending on what the owner wants, I might throw in one of the 4-kernel Jiffy DOS ROM switches. And if they want, I'll throw in my RF replacement, which is slightly better than this one. Obviously, offers a little bit more flexibility, and I think the video output quality is just a tad better. Right, and with that, I think we now have a fully working machine. This one was certainly quite the challenge. I don't think I've ever encountered one that had this many faults on it. And even though it was confusing at times, these are the ones that are definitely the most rewarding when you get them running. So thank you, William, for sending this in. Please don't send me anything else. Oh, and the overhead camera literally just shut down. So memory card is full on that now, which means I've got a lot of editing to do. So I'm going to get started on that, and hopefully I've done a decent job of it, as you'll obviously know by the time you get to this part of the video. So that is it. Thank you all for watching, and a huge thanks to the people that support the channel on Patreon. If you want to do the same, links to that are down below. I'm going to cover this all back up for now. Obviously, I'll get in touch with the owner about replacement ROMs and possibly replacing the RF modulator. I mean, like I said, this one is pretty decent, but mine is better. Trust me. So, yeah, that is it for me. I'm out of here. Bye. Wow.